January 19th, 2003. Rick Spector speaking with his cousin Joe Meyerowitz about his memories of growing up in Feltonville. And Joe, what did that neighborhood encompass? How big was it?
Well, the boundaries, roughly speaking, I would say, from the way I always knew it, although it might be larger than that, but say roughly from Rising Sun Avenue, Front Street on the west, heading east on Wyoming Avenue to G Street, to G in Wyoming, and then of course all the side streets and streets north of Wyoming Avenue. I'm sorry, going north, or actually going north Wyoming Avenue to Roosevelt Boulevard, and south would be I would say the old the Green Mound Cemetery and Cortlandt Street, and that's basically I would say would constitute Feltonville. Some people would say it extended over to 5th Street, to 5th and Wyoming. That's going west onto to 5th and Wyoming. But that's roughly the boundaries of what I would say would be Feltonville.
Okay, and when did you live in Feltonville? In what years?
Moved there around November of 1945, and I lived there until I got married in May of 1974.
Okay, a long time. And where did you live?
358 East Wyoming Avenue, and at that time when I was growing up, we didn't have postal zip codes, so it was Philadelphia 20, Pennsylvania, zip code, or rather Zone 20, Postal Zone 20, Pennsylvania.
Okay, what can you tell me about the main street, Wyoming Avenue?
Wyoming Avenue was a very nice street, having a sort of a combination of residential and business. Starting from the west, it was from around Rising Sun and Front Street. There were blocks of homes, some churches, and then as you head further east on Wyoming Avenue, you would come to the city recreation center, and next door to that was the Wyoming branch of the library. Across the street was a branch of the Frankfurt Arsenal, and then next to that was an entrance to the Green Mound Cemetery.
What was done in that Frankfurt Arsenal building, which I think is still there? It's a school building.
Yeah, what was done there was, as I remember, they made certain kinds of gauges for the United States Army. Gauges for the military, but I never fully exactly knew what it was that they made. Everyone always said that they made special kinds of gauges for that.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about your family.
Well, on the exact block I lived between Rose Hill Street and C Street, there were approximately 4 or 5 professional men there that had doctors' offices, and my father, who had a dentist's office. We had, there were, let's see, 3 doctors in that block, and my father, who was a dentist.
Who were the doctors? Were they general practice or?
All the 3 doctors were family physicians,
Uh-huh.
as I recall. They were family physicians. And my dad had the dental practice in that block.
How about some of the stores on Wyoming Avenue?
Okay, now the stores, the business district began right at C in Wyoming. I lived between C and Rose Hill Street. The first business that I recall there at the corner of, on my side of the street at C in Wyoming, was Tannenbaum's upholstery store.
Remember that.
And then you crossing over C Street began the heart of the business district, and those stores were your standard stores for supporting a neighborhood. We had because the neighborhood had a large Jewish influence there. We had when I first moved there, I can recall having approximately 4 delis in that block. 2 kosher butchers.
Can you recall any of the names of the
Yeah,
delis?
The delis. There was when I first got there was one on one side of the street was called Izzy's, and then that was on the north side of Wyoming Avenue. On the south side, right across the street, was Lou's Delicatessen, and then it became Stein's, and then down the street near Bodnot, which was a small street between C and D Street, there was a place called the Star Delicatessen. It had like a Jewish star in the window there, as I recall. And then further, there was further down. There may have been one other delicatessen, and I forgot the name of it offhand. But all within that block. Plus, there was a Jewish bakery, Boguslavsky's, which was there for many years, and that was their main bakery, and they also did a lot of their baking. And of course, they had opened up other bakeries.
Was that their first? I think their first was in South Philly, right?
It might have been in South Philadelphia,
Yeah.
their first, but I don't remember that part. But I do remember the big bakery they had right at Hurley Street, Wyoming Avenue and Hurley Street, where they had their store in the front and they had a whole baking complex in the back. And then there was also in that block there were 2 produce stores, as I recall. They both also had fish and produce in there. And there were 2 kosher butchers. And also there was an old Burke's 5 and 10 there, which was very popular with school children buying a lot of their school. So we would buy our school supplies there. Plus, there were 2 hardware stores in that block, Kerson's at the corner of Rose Hill and Wyoming, and at the end of the block, Miller's hardware store at D and Wyoming. There was also a candy store there, Shine's, as I recall, when I first moved in there. A barber shop, 2 barber shops. One called, I believe was called, one was owned by a Jewish man named also Izzy. I think it was Izzy's barber shop. And then across the street there was another one, Purry's, that may have come in some years later. I don't recall the exact year that they came. And I forgot. Going back west on Wyoming Avenue in terms of business, there was also, when I first moved in there, one of the first supermarkets I had ever been to, an old A&P. It was like in an old warehouse, and it was really a fascinating place to go. It wasn't like very flashy and modern that you get in today's supermarkets. It was more of a old warehouse type place, and it always had that smell of fresh coffee grounds, or coffee beans rather.
Where was that?
That was directly across the street from the elementary school called Clara Barton Elementary School, and that was a place that was one of the first places I recall going to with my mother when we moved around there. And speaking about barbershops, also there was a barbershop called Hugo's at Rose Hill in Wyoming, also across the street from the Clara Barton School. There was also a linoleum store called Strauss's, just almost next door to the old A&P store.
That didn't close too long ago.
Right.
Strauss.
That's right, Strauss's linoleum store.
What were some of the other neighborhood landmarks?
Let's see. I mentioned the libraries, the recreation center. The recreation center came a little bit later. That, as I recall, that opened up in 1950. So it was there, I mean, for a good part of the years that I spent there. The library was there all along. The library had a nice, interesting architecture. It was one of those buildings that was designed by the famous Philadelphia architect Frank Furness.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Carnegie Library.
Yes.
Yeah, donated, the money was donated
Yeah.
by Carnegie.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was Frank Furness. I think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what did one do for fun in Feltonville?
Well, in those days, we always had. I always had a lot of friends, and it was a nice group of friends I had. That was pretty diversified in the sense that the neighborhood that I grew up in had a lot of European people that came from European backgrounds, and so most of my friends who were Jewish, but I also had Gentile friends that we all played together.
What were some of the backgrounds of the people?
As far as you mean, what their parents did?
Well, I mean, their ethnic background.
Okay, the ethnic background. Well, first of all, my father, who was a dentist, had a big. His whole practice was a big part of his practice was of people of European background. So that would be Irish, German, Polish, Italian, and of course a very big Jewish practice. The people that many of these people were. Had come to this country and they were first time or were immigrants, and others had lived in that neighborhood for some years and had grown up there. But it was just a multi-ethnic, European ethnic
right.
practice that my father had, and so therefore the friends that I had came from, from the neighborhood and were.
So they were second generation.
Yes,
friends.
the friends were all second generation.
Right.
Yeah.
What did you do? You told me something before. You used to hang out with your friends and play some sort of game.
Yeah, the kind of in those days, television was first coming in, but people, as children, we didn't depend on television as our main source of entertainment. We played a lot of outdoor games in the schoolyard of Clara Barton Elementary School, in the neighborhood, on the street. We played these street games,
such as
wire ball, kick the can, buck.
What was buck?
Buck was a game where, I don't know how to describe this, but there were a number of fellows would line up like, I don't know how to describe it. They were like, each one would attach one to the other and bending over, and one guy would hold the guy's leg in front of him, and then a fellow would come running, and then a bunch of guys would come running and jump on top of this group of our backs, and you'd get another one and see how long you could hold them up until finally it was just too many people and then the whole thing would just collapse.
Yeah, you played a game called ass ball?
Which the loser would have to, and we played this game mostly in the schoolyard of using the walls of the of Barton School, and the loser of the game would have to get on his hands and knees against the wall, put his head down so he'd protect his head below his arms, and then the winner of the game would stand maybe 20 or 30 feet behind that person and try to hit the person on his behind with the ball. Just throw it and hit and try to hit it. Of course,
And this is a rubber ball.
a rubber or tennis ball or
Tennis
or
ball, pinky,
pink,
pimple
yeah,
ball.
pimple ball, something
Yeah.
like that.
Wow.
You know, and that was just a silly, crazy game that we played. We also played kick the can. We played a wire ball, which was based on basically a game of baseball where if you hit one wire, I think it was a first one base, second wire was maybe two bases. That's so long ago, I don't remember exactly how that was played. We played house ball, all variations of that. With
A handball
Punch.
is where you kind of bounced it and hit
Yeah,
it with
against
your
the
fist.
yeah, yeah.
I guess there were different names in different
Yeah,
neighborhoods. but-
can ball, which was actually a trash can against the wall of the schoolyard wall, and taking a basketball and flipping it in from a distance and try to get as many get the ball in the can as much as you could. Dodgeball. Many of these games were also played in the summertime when the school ran a playground
Mhm.
for those kids that couldn't or didn't want to go to day camp or overnight camp.
Mhm.
And so the school system did run a playground, and many of these games were also played at the Barton School playground.
What do you remember about the Barton School?
Barton School was the school that I went to for my first 8 years of education, and it was a good school. It had a lot of teachers there that we used to make fun of them a little bit. Many of the female teachers who were predominant in terms of the teaching profession at that time, many of them were not married and were of basically Scotch-Irish or of Irish or German
Uh-huh.
background. I remember names like Miss Kalmbach, Miss Liggett, Miss McFadden, and there were a number of, and also a number at that time of a number of women that were Jewish women that started to become teachers in those years too, and also we had a Jewish phys ed teacher, a gym teacher by the name of Mr. Shutter, and he ran the physical education, and also after school he had the stamp club, which I eventually became a member of also, and we had auditorium. I remember it was always a treat to see a movie on something in the auditorium, when they would take us to the auditorium and see a movie.
What kind of movies?
Yeah, they were like travelogue type movies, or something related to science,
Educational.
type films.
Yeah, it was one of the brand names, Educational Pictures.
Oh, okay.
I remember from back then.
Yeah. And we had the Barton Review, which was usually held at the end of the school year in around May, where students that had show business type talents would perform, and it would always be held after school, or actually at night. We would come back around maybe 7 o'clock after dinner and see a show business type of presentation, so to speak, skits and kids that sang songs or played an instrument, that type of presentation.
How about the Felton movies? Did you go there?
Oh, what a wonderful time I had with the Saturday matinees. Living in Feltonville enabled me to get to anywhere in the city, and there was a movie in Feltonville called the Felton Movie, and that was on Rising Sun Avenue, where it met like across Front Street, like at a diagonal.
Still there.
It's still there, yeah. The Felton Movie, as I understand, is now an Hispanic
Boxing.
nightclub and
Nightclub, yeah.
things like, yeah. It was a huge movie, a very large movie with a balcony,
Oh, there you go.
and all the my friends, many times we went there. It was cost 10 cents to get into the movie, and you'd spend a whole afternoon in there watching cartoons and short subject things, and maybe a double feature of two films. The old westerns, Flash Gordon type movies, and it was just a great way to spend the whole afternoon. But also, because we lived on the main street, Wyoming Avenue, with a 75 trackless trolley, which originally was a regular trolley car, and then when I first moved in there in 45, it was still a regular trolley car. A track trolley, right.
Track trolley.
And then eventually became trackless trolley, and it enabled me to travel anywhere in the city, so that other movies that I could go to would be, if I went to Logan, which was just on the other side of Roosevelt Boulevard from basically where I lived, I could go to the Broad Street movies, where there was the Logan Theater, which was also a very large theater with the balcony, the Broad Theater. There were three movies there, the Logan, the Broad, and the Rockland theaters, and I could go see movies there. Or, and that was where I was heading west on Wyoming Avenue, or if I wanted to take the 75 trackless trolley and go east, I could go to Frankfurt and see the movies on Frankfurt Avenue, such as the Roosevelt, the Circle theaters, and also the Ellis Theater, and I could see movies there. So I had very good access to wherever I wanted to go.
Did kids go out of the neighborhood
Yes,
frequently?
I often went out of the neighborhood myself to go visit an old friend of mine who, from the neighborhood that I left, but he still lived around there. I used to go back down to the neighborhood which I was born in, and which is now, well, it was called Northern Liberties then. It's currently now a popular area to live in now, which is becoming gentrified. But in those days, where my friend that I used to visit lived at 7th and Girard Avenue, 7th Street and Girard Avenue, right near the corner of 7th and Girard. So that I would take the 75 trackless trolley either to Rising Sun in Wyoming or to 5th in Wyoming, and pick up either the 47 trolley or the 50 trolley and go downtown to my old neighborhood of Northern Liberties to visit a friend of mine. And I would spend an afternoon down there, just hanging around and
How about restaurants? Were there such in Feltonville, or where did you?
Yes, the restaurants that were popular at that time were in the area of near the old Sears, which on the boulevard. There was a Howard Johnson's right across from the old Sears on the boulevard.
Charlie's Pizzeria?
Charlie's, yeah, that came later.
Oh, right, it's still there.
It's still there, yes.
Right.
The old Howard Johnson's is now an IHOP,
Right.
I believe. And the other places, mainly we would probably drive to with my parents. And since Oxford Circle was also an up-and-coming community when I was growing up, many times we would drive over to your family
Right.
in Oxford Circle. And
What kind of car did your father have?
my father's first car, my father got his first car in 1950. Many people had cars before that even, but he didn't bother driving until around 1950. And he had a Dodge. I forgot the model exactly. It was an old gray Dodge.
I remember your father had a car with push-button transmission.
Yeah.
That came later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, let's see, as far as other places, things we visited. I mean, many things we did in that neighborhood. When you mentioned about going out of the neighborhood, I also would go visit out of the neighborhood to my father's, my grandparents on my father's side, who lived in South Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. And before we had the car, we would take the trolley down there.
Ran regularly and no problems?
No, we
Yeah.
take the 75, as I said, to either the 47 or 50. The 50 actually, I believe, yeah, they both ran all the way down to South Philadelphia. And we would go visit down there. It was a whole day, I mean, to go visit.
Mhm.
After we got a car, then we would drive down there. And so we went out of the neighborhood a lot. But it was always within the city, basically, because in those days, most people lived in the cities. This was prior to the big moves to the suburbs. And
So visiting was a
Visiting.
popular thing to do.
Right.
Popular thing to do.
That's right.
How about the synagogues?
We had 3 synagogues in Feltonville. We had an Orthodox synagogue at B Street and Roosevelt Boulevard called B'nai Yitzhak.
The building is still there, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's now that is now a fundamentalist church. There was another then on the Roosevelt Boulevard itself at D Street was Congregation B'rith Israel, which was a large conservative congregation. And right on Wyoming Avenue, where I lived, the synagogue that I attended and I was bar mitzvahed at was the Beth Uziel congregation, which originally was at in the block between C Street and D Street, right in the middle of the business district there. But there were a group of homes there, right near the old Ralph Blumberg real estate office. And a couple doors away was the synagogue and Hebrew school, which is where I went.
The original.
The original Beth Uziel.
Is that building still there?
Well, yeah, those group of homes is still there.
Okay, so it was in one of the homes.
Yes. And then eventually that Beth Uziel congregation decided to build a new building, and they moved up the street further east to Rohrer Street and Wyoming Avenue, and opened up a large synagogue there. Rohrer, which is a little street just right before Whitaker in Wyoming. In those days, I had extended family living around there. Up just north of Wyoming Avenue on Eleanor Street. I had my grandmother. The grandfather lived there for a while. They had a property there, and also your mother and father, I believe, lived there for a while. I think I don't know, were you born right in
I was
Oxford?
born on Savage
But
Street.
your sister Marcia, I think, lived there.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, Marcia was born in Strawberry Mansion.
Yeah, so then
but,
she would have.
But she came there as a little child. Right.
And so there was family members there, and then eventually my grandmother moved to another apartment at Tampa, a little street called Tampa Street, and Wyoming
I remember
Avenue.
that funny tree on her lawn, which you don't see anywhere else. You remember that tree?
Oh.
Big leaves and
Yeah.
it's like not a tropical, but it was a very unusual tree for that area.
Yeah.
How about that? Did you ever go in that park back there, Bingham Park?
Yeah, actually it's called Tacony Creek Park.
Stony Creek Park?
Tacony Park, right. And that was a popular place to go to play in. In those years, Whitaker Avenue did not go through,
Oops, sorry.
Whitaker Avenue did not extend through the park, so that you could go into the park from Bingham Street. And it was a very large park. It had a creek there, and we used to go and play in there.
I remember the old railroad tracks that used to go to Sears.
That's right. The old railroad tracks cut through there.
The trestles are still there, but the
Yes.
bridge is gone.
Yeah. One of the most interesting memories I had of Wyoming Avenue in those days, prior to the opening up of Whitaker Avenue, the Whitaker Avenue bridge through the park that connected to Whitaker Avenue on the other side of the park, which led to the Roosevelt Boulevard, where the meatpacking trucks that came through with live animals, cattle and pigs that were heading to I believe it was called Penn Meatpacking Company, the slaughterhouse that was down in Bridesburg. And so these trucks would be coming from the west, I believe from western Pennsylvania, and they would come from the Pennsylvania Turnpike and head down into the boulevard, and then they had to get down into Bridesburg, so they would cut over Wyoming Avenue. And particularly during the summertime, these trucks with the cattle or pigs would come through there, and the smell there was just absolutely terrible as they would come through on their way to the slaughterhouse that was down in Bridesburg. And everyone used to comment about that, and the smell would just linger there for a while until it eventually went away. But that was, and also I remember too the people complaining about trucks coming through that neighborhood, and they were organizing different kinds of protests and contacting neighborhood politicians and things like that to get this Whitaker Avenue opened up, which was a wide street, so that therefore these trucks could head over, instead of cutting down into Wyoming Avenue, would continue over the Roosevelt Boulevard to Whitaker Avenue, and then make a right turn at Whitaker Avenue to head down into the areas of Juniata Park and the industrial areas of lower Juniata Park, and going into Kensington and Bridesburg and Port Richmond and places like that. So
That's interesting. Early memories of radio or television. Not particularly Feltonville, but amusements back then.
well, the amusements, one of the things I do recall, and it was very always looked forward to, was the Ringling Brothers Circus coming to the neighborhood. Now, they came to the old Lighthouse Field, which is directly across from what is now St. Christopher's Hospital for Children, around Whitaker and Erie and Frontier. It was in a piece of land that was between Whitaker Avenue and Front Street, Lighthouse Field, and the circus used to come there a lot, and that was just south of Feltonville. And we used to walk down there from the neighborhood, right down Whitaker Avenue, to see the circus. And the circus with the circus had its own group, its own production, but then there was the side shows. I forgot the name.
Straight shows?
The straight shows, right? The James Straight shows, right?
Baby in the Bottle.
Yeah, they had what they call a freak show and other crazy things there. So that was a very popular.
And you would walk. You would walk from.
We would walk generally down Whitaker Avenue to get to this, to the circus. Well, of course, there was the movies as entertainment, and.
How about the old Wyoming Avenue Bridge? Recall anything about that? It was a steel structure, I remember, before they reconstructed it.
Over at the Juniata Park, going over the golf course, right?
The golf course.
Yeah, that led into that went right through Juniata Park and over Fisher's Lane, which is like an old rural lane. That would be more just east of Feltonville, which was called Juniata Park, and it was like an old rural country road there that this Wyoming Avenue Bridge passed over. Another popular thing in the summertime in those years was also outside of our neighborhood, just directly south, it would be just east and south of Feltonville. A friend of mine, whose brother lived in the Carl Mackley Apartments, they had a swimming pool there, and we used to go swimming, and we would again either get driven there. Most of the time we were driven there because that was a little bit too far to walk. Well, we may have walked there too, but most of the time my friends.
And Bristol, the Carl Mackley apartment.
Yeah.
It's still there.
It's still there.
They fixed them up.
Yeah. They did.
It had an outdoor pool.
What's that?
It had an outdoor pool?
Outdoor pool there. And we went there for swimming a lot, free swimming, or at least we got in as guests to the, because he was the brother of my friend.
Vacations.
All right. It was very popular when I was growing up to take a vacation, well, not too far from home. At that time, it was very popular to go to Atlantic City, and my family would take me and my sister there, and we would usually stay in one of the kosher guest houses down there.
How'd you get to Atlantic City?
We drove down there,
Sure.
although initially I do recall also taking the old Pennsylvania Reading seashore lines. We went by train, and then later on, after my father got a car, we drove to Atlantic City.
Now, the Pennsylvania Reading Seashore Line departed from where?
It departed from the old Broad Street station across from City Hall. There used to be an old railroad station there. That was the main railroad station, right across from City Hall, and what is now, I believe, the area of the Municipal Services Building. I believe they call that Rayburn Plaza.
Yeah.
Was the place where that was.
So that train would cut through Philly into a bridge to New Jersey, or what is it?
Okay. It ran. That train started from there, and I believe it went to 30th Street, and then I think it would cross over the Schuylkill and head up, and then cross back over the Schuylkill, and then head over to the North Philadelphia station, and then continue on into the northeast along the main Penn
Central
lines, yeah, the Pennsylvania Railroad lines,
Pennsylvania
there's
Railroad,
yeah,
right.
and into New Jersey.
Okay. So you stayed at kosher guest houses?
Yeah, usually one of the guest houses there, the kosher guest houses, one that I particularly recall was the Margulis's on Pacific Avenue, around in the Chelsea neighborhood. That's where we used to stay.
Margulis.
There was another
They
place.
serve you meals?
Yes, we had meals there. There was a woman who, most of these people that ran these places came out of the Holocaust victims, and they ran these guest houses. And another place that we stayed at was the Creston Hotel. There was another place called.
What was the Creston?
The Creston. I don't remember the exact street.
But in that general area of Chelsea?
Yeah, in the general area of Chelsea, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
How long did you go for?
Usually it was a week to 10 days to 2 weeks, as I recall. That was usually somewhere around 10 days that we would go, that we would spend time there.
Other Philadelphia families or
It
people
was
from
very
other areas?
yeah, a lot of Philadelphia. It was a very popular place to go. Atlantic City was very popular to go to in those days, from all of the old neighborhoods of Philadelphia that were particularly where the Jewish people lived in Philadelphia, and they would go to Atlantic City to spend time with vacations. And that's,
Okay. Marcia was saying about some group or something you would...
Oh yeah, one of the things that we had as far as playing goes, and with my friends, we had a club. Clubs were big in those days. We make up clubs on the spur of the moment. And one of the a club that I particularly remembered was we used to call it the Mystic Knights of C Street. Now that was a takeoff on the old Amos and Andy television series, where they had a fraternal group called the Mystic Knights of the Sea.
Okay.
And we made up our own club because we lived at C Street was a major area that a street that we played in.
The Mystic Knights of C Street. Yeah.
One of the club that we had formed, friends and I had formed, was a club called the Mystic Knights of C Street, because C Street was the main a major street right around the corner from Wyoming Avenue, where we actually played in the street some of our games, like Wireball or Dead Box, which was using the Dead Box was that game where you used bottle caps. You took chalk and you made a box with numbers and a skull in the center, and we would shoot these bottle caps. They used to call them beeries. That was another term they used for them. And so C Street was a big street that we we played on or we hung out on.
Right.
We stayed on. There were porches there where we would sit on the porches and just shoot the bull all day.
Seeing where?
See in Wyoming.
Seeing Wyoming.
Yeah. Now on C Street, it was the block. It was the 4600 block between Wyoming and Cortlandt Street.
Mm-hmm.
And we formed this club, and we either would sit on porches of friends' houses there and just play games. If it was raining, we would play board games like Monopoly or checkers or various kinds of games, and just talk and shoot the breeze all day. Or we would go into my house. In those days, we didn't have a finished basement. We used to call everything. The basement was called a cellar. And we had a clubhouse that we made in my cellar, and we set up a folding table, and we would just sit and talk about things and play games down there, and that was our club called the Mystic Knights of C Street, and that was all a takeoff on the old Amos and Andy television series where they had a fraternal group that they belonged to called the Mystic Knights of the Sea.
Okay, these were elementary school pals? Or?
Yes, elementary and into high school.
High school.
Into early high school.
You went to Almy?
Alny High School was the high school I went to after graduating from Barton School.
What neighborhoods did Almy High School draw from?
Alny High School drew from Feltonville. It drew from Alny, plus another area which was called F in the Boulevard area, F Street, which was on the other side of the
Tacony Creek
Felton,
Park?
yeah, on the other side of Tacony Creek Park. That's correct. And it drew from those areas, Rising Sun Avenue, all the way up into Fifth Street, and parts of the beginning parts of when Oxford Circle, the old Castor Gardens and those areas. There were some students that came there because this was prior to Northeast High School and Lincoln High School opening up. So a lot of those students came from the Castor Gardens, Oxford Circle area to Alny High School also.
So it was a multi-ethnic high school.
Multi-ethnic with a large Jewish population. So it was a very diverse school, at least. But most of the backgrounds of the students were either the European, Eastern European or Northern European groups, or of a large Jewish contingent of students that attended Alny High School.
Okay.
I think we covered a good part of growing up in Feltonville.
Any fondest memory you recall?
But it was a wonderful neighborhood.
Yeah.
Growing up in, it had everything you would want for recreation, for food, entertainment. It was just a great place to go to. Spending time. Sometimes I would spend time in the library. I'd spend a whole afternoon there. One other thing I did forget to mention was that with the recreation center, during the 1960s, as I was getting older, I played a lot of table tennis at the recreation center, and my friends and at that time we would all get together like on a Saturday afternoon and play table tennis and have our own little tournaments. So I got to learn and perfect my game of table tennis at the old recreation center on Wyoming Avenue. Other than that, and one other thing too, one of my friends was more of an intellectual type. His father was one of the doctors on Wyoming Avenue, and many times for cultural enrichment, I would go into his house because his father was big into classical music and had many old records.
What was his name?
His name was Dr. Jacob Pinson.
Pinson.
Pinson. And he had many old classical records, the old 33s and 78s, and they had a sound system set up throughout the house so that many times I would go over there and they'd have classical music playing during the day. And I also learned how to play chess with my friend Mark Pinson, and he was very intellectual and scholarly, and I learned to play chess with him. The other, my other friends was more playing other kind of street games,
Right.
and that's about it. I guess
That's a lot of good
that
news.
covers. Is that pretty much
Yeah.
give you enough?
Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff.